The engine had sputtered twice before dying, and I had pulled the car to the side of the highway with the kind of controlled fury I usually reserve for board meetings and people who waste my time. The heat came off the asphalt in visible waves, the kind of heat that presses against your skin like something alive, like something that wants something from you. I stepped out, heels clicking against the cracked road, and I scanned the horizon the way I always scan every room I enter, quickly, precisely, looking for the nearest exit. And that is when I saw her. Her back was to me at first. She was on the far side of a rusted truck parked 20 meters ahead, in an orange safety vest that was 2 sizes too large, lifting something heavy. There was something about the way she stood, the angle of her shoulders, the way she pushed her hair out of her face with the back of her wrist. That gesture. I had seen that gesture so many times that the memory of it hit me somewhere behind my sternum, before my mind had even processed the name. Cecilia. My mouth went dry in a way that had nothing to do with the heat. She had not seen me yet. I stood there, briefcase still in my hand, blinking against the white light, and for a fraction of a second I thought about getting back in the car, calling a driver, waiting in the air conditioning until someone came to rescue Helena Vasquez from the indignity of a broken vehicle on a highway in the middle of nowhere. That is what Helena Vasquez would have done. That is what I always do. I control the narrative. I choose when people see me, and I never allow myself to be caught unprepared. But my legs had already made the decision my brain was still debating. I started walking toward her. I want to tell you that I was calm. I want to say that I walked over there with the same composure I bring to every negotiation, that my pulse was steady, and my thoughts were organized into neat little columns the way I keep my desk. But the truth, and lately I have become almost dangerously committed to the truth, is that by the time she turned around and her eyes landed on me, I had completely forgotten what composure felt like. 3 years. 3 years and 2 months, if I am being precise, which I always am. She looked at me for a long, still moment, and I watched something travel across her face, recognition, and then something harder, something I had put there with my own carelessness, and then a kind of blankness that was almost worse than the anger because it meant she had practiced it. Helena. Not a question, not quite a greeting either. Cecilia. My voice came out steadier than I expected. She looked at the car, the sleek, expensive thing, now sitting helplessly on the shoulder of the road. And then she looked back at me, and something flickered in her eyes that I could not read. She was different. That was the first coherent thought I managed. She was different in the way that people are different when they have been through something that changes the density of them, when the world has pressed against them hard enough to make them more solid, more real. There were new lines around her eyes. Her hands, when I had known her, were the hands of someone who spent her days in offices, light touch hands, precise hands. Now they were hands that had been working in the sun. And she was still, God help me, she was still. I stopped that thought before it finished itself. Your car broke down, she said, and it was not a question either. The engine stopped, I said, because I am nothing if not accurate. She looked at me for another moment, and I felt the weight of every single thing I had never said to her, all of it pressing behind my eyes like a headache that had been waiting years for its moment. Then she turned, said something to the man driving the truck. A coworker, I realized. They were part of a road crew, and walked toward me. Let me take a look, she said. You know about car engines? I know about a lot of things I didn't know before. She said it simply, not as an accusation, though it landed like one. She opened the hood, and I stood beside her in the crushing heat, and I thought about the last time I had been in a room with this woman. The day I called her into my office and told her she was terminated. I had used those exact words, "You are terminated," as if she were a contract, as if she were a clause in an agreement that had become inconvenient. I had sat behind my desk with my hands folded and my expression neutral, and I had watched the color drain from her face, and I had told myself that I was doing the right thing. that what my assistant Maria had told me about Cecilia sharing confidential company information was credible, that I had no choice. I had not asked Cecilia to explain herself. I think about that every single day. "The belt," she said, straightening up. "It snapped. You're not driving this anywhere today. I have a presentation in the city in 4 hours." She looked at me with those eyes, and for a moment I saw something that almost looked like the woman I used to know. The one who would have immediately started solving the problem, who had this extraordinary ability to turn chaos into order. Then the moment closed, like a door shutting quietly. "Call a tow truck," she said. "The signal is almost non-existent out here. I have been trying for 20 minutes. She was quiet. The sun was a physical presence between us. Somewhere far off, a car passed on the opposite lane, and the sound of it faded into the vast silence of the highway. "I can drive you to the next town," she said finally, and I could see it cost her something to say it. "You can get signal there. My shift ends in an hour." "You do not have to. I know I don't." Her voice was even, careful. "I'm offering." I could have said no. The Helena I had spent 3 years being would have said no. Would have waited on the side of the road in 40-degree heat before accepting help from someone she had wronged. Because accepting the help would have meant acknowledging the wrong. And Helena Vasquez did not acknowledge wrongs. Helena Vasquez moved forward. She had built an entire empire on moving forward. "Thank you," I said instead, and the words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking in a language I once knew fluently and had let go rusty. She nodded once, returned to her crew, and I stood by my useless car and watched her, and tried to understand what was happening in my chest. This hollow, reverberating feeling, like something that had been numb for years, was starting to feel sensation again. And the sensation was not entirely pleasant, the way feeling returns to a frozen limb. The hour passed in slow motion. I sat in the partial shade of my car and answered emails on my phone with the quarter signal I could occasionally coax out of the network, and every few minutes my eyes moved to where she was working and I pulled them away, and then they moved again, and I stopped fighting it. She worked with a quiet efficiency that I recognized. There was a young man on the crew who kept trying to take the heavier things from her, and she kept redirecting him with a word or a look, not unkindly, just firmly. And I thought, yes, that is exactly who she is. Was. Is. When she came toward the car at the end of her shift, she had changed out of the safety vest and into a plain white shirt that was stuck to her back with sweat. And she had a bottle of water in each hand, and she held one out to me without a word. I took it. Our fingers did not touch. I noticed this. I noticed the exact millimeters of air between us as the bottle transferred between our hands, and I thought, when did I start measuring distance in millimeters? Her truck was old, the kind of old that has character, a crack across the lower corner of the windshield, and a dashboard with more scratches than smooth surfaces, and an air conditioner that worked if you hit the vent in a specific way, which she demonstrated without explanation, reaching across with the easy confidence of someone in their own space. The inside smelled like the road, and like something floral and familiar that I spent the first 5 minutes of the drive trying to identify, before I understood it was just her. We drove in silence for several minutes. Outside, the highway unspooled ahead of us, straight and flat, the scrub on either side gold and dried, the sky so enormous it felt aggressive. "How long have you been working on the road crews?" I asked. "About a year," she said. She did not offer more. "Before that?" She glanced at me. "You want a timeline?" "I want to know how you are." The silence that followed had a texture to it. She drove with one hand on the wheel, relaxed, watching the road, and I watched the side of her face and waited. "I'm fine," she said, and I knew her well enough. I had known her well enough to hear the architecture inside that word, the things it was constructed to hold in place. "Cecilia. Helena. Her voice was still even. "I appreciate the ride situation. I don't need anything else." I looked at my hands in my lap. "I made a mistake," I said. She said nothing. "When I fired you, it was a mistake. I was told things that were not true, and I did not give you the chance to—" I stopped, started again. "I did not ask you what actually happened, and I should have. I should have asked." The truck hummed around us. A bird crossed the road ahead, low and quick. "It's been 3 years," she said. "I know. You didn't come to ask me then. No. You didn't call. No. So why are you telling me now?" There was no heat in the question. That almost made it worse. Anger I could have worked with. This careful neutrality, this woman who had simply closed the drawer on what I had done, that was harder to face than any fury. "Because you are right in front of me," I said. "And I have thought about saying this to you for 3 years, and if I do not say it now, I will spend another 3 years with it, and I am very tired of carrying it." Another long pause. She checked the mirror. The town was beginning to appear on the horizon, low buildings shimmering in the heat. "Okay," she said. "Just that. Okay. Not forgiveness, not warmth. Just, I heard you." The acknowledgement of someone who has decided to be careful. I found that I could breathe a little easier anyway. In the town, she pulled into a gas station, and I got signal, and I called my assistant and rearranged the afternoon. And when I came back to where she was standing outside the truck, leaning against the passenger side and looking at her phone, she had a smudge of road dust along her jaw, and I had an impulse so sudden and ill-advised that it startled me physically. I wanted to reach up and wipe it away with my thumb. I absolutely did not do this. "There's a diner across the street," I said instead. "Let me buy you lunch." She looked at me. "Please," I added. The word felt like a small surrender, and I meant it that way. Something shifted in her expression. Not much, a fraction. But I had spent 4 years learning to read the landscape of that face before I wasted 3 years pretending I hadn't. And I caught it. 1 hour, she said. 1 hour, I agreed. The diner was cool inside, the kind of aggressive air conditioning that small-town diners deploy like a weapon against the heat outside, and we sat across from each other in a booth with red vinyl seats, and a waitress brought us menus with the efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times. I looked at the menu and registered nothing on it. Across from me, Cecilia read hers with her reading glasses on. She had not worn reading glasses before. And I looked at those glasses and felt something move through me like a current. She had lived a whole life while I was not looking. That thought arrived without ceremony and settled in me with considerable weight. We ordered. The food came. We ate, and the silence between us was different now, less like a wall and more like the pause before someone speaks, the kind of quiet that is full of things being considered. "Where are you staying?" she asked eventually. "I'll get a room here for the night. The car won't be ready until tomorrow at earliest." She nodded, turned her coffee cup in her hands. "Do you still have the office on the top floor? The one with the windows on every side?" The question surprised me. "Yes. I used to love that office," she said, and it was the first unguarded thing she had said, and she seemed to know it, because she looked down at her cup. "I know," I said quietly. "You used to get there before me and open all the windows." She looked up. Her expression was complicated. "I remember everything," I said. "Because I do. That is the thing nobody tells you about the things you push down and seal away and refuse to look at. They do not disappear. They just wait. They stay down there in the dark, and they preserve themselves perfectly, like specimens in amber. Every detail intact. Every exact shade of feeling preserved right there waiting for the moment you finally open the lid. She put her cup down. "Helena, I am not asking you for anything," I said quickly. "I just want you to know that when I am honest with myself about those 4 years, you were the best thing about my work, Cecilia. And I am aware that this is a strange thing to say in a diner in a town I cannot name off the top of my head, 3 years too late. I know that." She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes are very dark, almost black, and in them I could see the layers, the caution, and underneath it something older, something from before the caution was necessary. "You always knew exactly what to say," she said. "That was always the thing about you. You always knew the right words, the precise words, and I could never tell. I still can't tell. If it's real, or if it's just another kind of strategy." I let that land. It deserved to land fully, without me deflecting it. "I understand why you'd think that," I said. "So which is it?" "I don't have a strategy right now," I said. "I haven't had one since the moment I saw you on the side of that road. Everything I've said to you in the last 2 hours has been unrehearsed, which, if you know me, you know is saying something." A sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, but the ghost of one. Just a small exhale through the nose, a relaxing of something around her mouth. And that tiny involuntary sound hit me harder than a speech would have. "You're different," she said. "I hope so." She tilted her head slightly, considering me. What happened? It was a fair question. I had spent 3 years constructing and expanding and fortifying the empire of Helena Vasquez, and from the outside, from the business pages, from the profile features, from the industry galas, it probably looked like success doing what success does, which is compound itself. But there is a kind of success that becomes indistinguishable from isolation, a kind that you build wall by wall, until you wake up one morning in a glass-walled penthouse with everything you said you wanted, and realize you are not actually inside the life you are living. You are observing it from a very clean, very quiet remove. I told her some version of this. Not all of it. Not the mornings I had sat at my desk and pulled up her personnel file just to see her name. Not the time I had driven to the neighborhood where her emergency contact listed her parents' address, had sat in the car for 40 minutes, had driven away again. Some things you carry alone. But I told her enough that she would understand that what I was saying now was not rhetoric. She listened. She is a good listener. She always was. There is a quality of attention in her that most people do not have. A sense that she is receiving what you say. All of it. Not just waiting for the next moment she can speak. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I lost a lot after you fired me." "I know. You don't know all of it. Tell me." She told me. Carefully, steadily, with none of the self-pity that the situation would have entitled her to, she told me about the months after. The way the industry closes around a gap left by a dismissal from a company like mine. The professional doors that stopped opening. The financial strain that followed. The relationship she'd been in that had not survived the pressure. The move back to her hometown. The decision to take the road crew job because it paid reliably and she had stopped caring about what the job looked like and needed to care about what it actually was. I sat across from her, and I listened, and I did not look away, and I did not offer explanations or mitigations, because she was not asking for those. She was not asking for anything. She was just finally being able to say it to the person who needed to hear it. When she finished, the lunch crowd had thinned around us. The waitress refilled our coffee without being asked. "I'm sorry," I said. I know those words are, I know they are not enough, but they are what I have, and they are true. She looked at me for a long time. Then she picked up her coffee cup and said, "Okay, Helena." Okay again. The same word. But this time it landed differently, less like a door held shut, and more like one that had been unlocked but not yet opened. And maybe that was everything. Maybe that was all that could be asked of a single afternoon in a diner in a dusty town on a highway that had not appeared on my agenda when the day began. I sat across from Cecilia, and I felt the specific ache of someone looking at something irreplaceable that they once threw away. And I felt, underneath it, the first hesitant warmth of something I had not allowed myself to feel in a long time. She drove me to the only hotel in town, a modest place with clean rooms and the kind of staff who say good evening and mean it. She pulled up outside and put the truck in park, and we both looked at the dashboard for a second, the way people do when neither of them has decided to be the one to end the conversation. "I'll be here tomorrow morning," I said. "If you're not working. If you wanted—" I stopped. I had been doing so well. "Coffee," I said. "If you wanted coffee." She turned to look at me, and for a moment she just looked, and I let myself look back, and there was something in the air between us that was neither of us. That was just what happened when we were in the same space, something that had not diminished in 3 years, and that I suspected would not diminish in 30. 7:30, she said. I nodded. She nodded. I got out of the truck and walked into the hotel, and I did not look back, though every nerve in my body wanted me to, because I knew that if I looked back, she would see my face, and my face was doing something I had not yet finished deciding about. The room was clean and quiet and smelled like laundry and a little like dry heat that had seeped through the walls all summer. I sat on the edge of the bed and I called my assistant and moved 3 meetings and answered 4 urgent messages and did all the things that Helena Vasquez was expected to do in any circumstances, and all the while some deeper part of me was back in the truck, in the heat, at the exact moment when Cecilia had said 7:30 and the word had landed in my chest like a small specific point of warmth. I had thought about her many times in 3 years. In the abstract, in the way of guilt and regret, in the way of reviewing a decision and knowing now where it was wrong. But I hadn't let myself think about her the other way, the true way, the way I had always thought about her in the unguarded moments during the 4 years she worked for me, the moments between meetings, the early mornings before the office filled, the evenings when she stayed late and the building emptied around us, and for a few minutes it felt like we were the only 2 people in an enormous, quiet city. I lay down on the hotel bed still in my work clothes and stared at the ceiling and let myself think about her that way now. I let myself account for it fully, honestly, without the careful management I had applied to it for years. I had loved her. That was the true thing. Not the almost love of proximity or of habit, but the real thing. The kind that rearranges the way you understand yourself. The kind you build a wall around because it terrifies you completely. I had loved Cecilia, and I had been terrified of loving Cecilia. And when Maria had come to me with those accusations about information being leaked, accusations I now knew were false, manufactured by someone who had seen what I felt and knew it was leverage, I had believed them because believing them was easier than understanding what was happening in me. That is the thing about fear. It does not announce itself as fear. It shows up dressed as reason, as professionalism, as being sensible. It shows up saying, "You are doing the right thing." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. In the morning, I woke up before the alarm, showered, put on the only clothes I had since my luggage was still in the broken car, yesterday's shirt freshly pressed as best I could manage, and went downstairs. It was 7:10. I found a small table near the window and ordered coffee and a glass of water, and sat waiting with the specific alertness of someone who is trying to appear calm. She came at 7:30 exactly. She had showered too, her hair still slightly damp, and she was wearing a dark blue shirt, simple, and she saw me from the door, and for a moment she just stood there, and I thought, she almost did not come. I could see the remnant of the decision on her face, the awareness that she had stepped toward something she was not entirely sure about. She crossed the room and sat down across from me, and the waitress appeared, and we ordered, and the morning came in through the window, and the town outside was waking up slowly. We talked for almost 2 hours, not about the past, not directly. We talked around it, and through it, and underneath it, in the way that two people do when they are reconstructing the shape of each other after years of absence. I found out that she had started painting again. She had painted before, small canvases that she had kept on her desk at the office, which I had looked at when she was not there, which I had thought about more than I ever told her. I told her about the expansion of the company into markets she would not have expected. And when she said that's actually very smart, Helena, I felt an absurd and entirely disproportionate pride that had nothing to do with the business. At one point she said something funny, dry, quick, the way she had always been funny, with the delivery of someone who is genuinely more interested in the observation than in being recognized for having made it. And I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that surprises you. And she looked at me when I laughed, and something in her face did a small, quiet thing that I filed very carefully away. Somewhere in the middle of everything, I have to stop and ask, does this happen to you? Does the world ever become so ordinary in its miracle that you stop noticing it until something breaks and rearranges, and suddenly you're sitting in a small hotel dining room in a town that wasn't on your calendar, and the person across from you is making the walls feel like they have a little more warmth in them? I wonder sometimes if the detours are not the interruptions of the life. I wonder if they are the life, and the rest of it is just the stuff in between. At 9:15, she said she needed to check on something for work, a schedule she was expecting by message, and we both looked at the table and knew the morning was ending. The car will probably be ready by noon, I said. Yeah. And you have work? This afternoon, yeah. The check came. I paid before she could reach for it, not making a statement, just moving quickly. She looked at me, but did not argue. We stood outside on the small porch of the hotel, the morning already hot, and she put on her sunglasses and looked at the street. I'm going to give you my number, I said. She turned to look at me. You do not have to use it, I said. I am not asking you for a commitment or an explanation or anything. You do not owe me a single thing, but I would like you to have it, in case. She looked at me for a moment. I held very still. In case of what? She asked. Her voice was quiet, not guarded, quite something else, something that was paying attention. In case you want to talk, I said. In case you finish a painting and want to tell someone. In case you're on the highway and you find another person stranded. A pause. In case you decide that the fact that I was wrong does not have to be the last thing between us. Silence. The town went about its morning around us. Then she held out her hand. I looked at it. Understood. I took my phone out, unlocked it, passed it to her. She typed her number in, passed it back. Our fingers touched this time, briefly, in the transfer, and I felt it from my fingertips all the way up my arm, and I kept my face composed, which was the hardest thing I had done in years. Okay, she said. And the word, for the third time, meant something different than the times before. She walked to her truck and I watched her go, and this time when she got in and the engine turned over, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw me standing there watching, and I could not see her expression from this distance, but I knew the shape of that glance. I had cataloged every single one of them over 4 years, and then spent 3 more carrying them. I went inside and sat back down at the now cleared table with the rest of my coffee, and I thought about the road, the long, flat road with its impossible heat, the kind of road that makes you feel very small and very clear, stripped down to whatever you actually are when all the structure is removed. And I thought about the fact that I had broken down on that specific stretch at that specific time, and that she had been there, and that I do not believe in accidents the way I used to, with the confident dismissal of someone who has never needed to. The car was ready at 2 p.m. I drove back toward the city with all the windows down for the first half hour, until the highway gave way to the edges of the metropolitan sprawl, and I rolled them up and returned to being Helena Vasquez, the composed one, the correct one, the one who always has the right answer. But underneath that, quieter, something else. That evening at 9:47, my phone lit up with a message from an unsaved number. No name yet. I knew immediately. The message said, "I finished a painting last month. A road. It's mostly yellows." I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, and the feeling that moved through me was something I had no professional word for, something that belonged entirely to the personal self that I had been neglecting for years, that self that had been sitting in a quiet room waiting for me to remember it was there. I typed back, "I'd like to see it. Whenever you're ready. No pressure." 3 years of silence. 3 years and a broken engine, and 40-degree heat, and a small diner, and 2 cups of coffee in a hotel dining room with windows. That is what it took. Or maybe those things were just the form it took this time, for something that was always going to find its way back to the surface. She replied 2 minutes later. 2 minutes, which is not a long time, really, but it is long enough for a decision. "Okay," she said. "Maybe soon." I put the phone down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling of my own bedroom, the penthouse ceiling with its height and its clean lines. And I thought about a painting of a road, mostly yellows, and a woman who had made something from the hard thing instead of letting the hard thing be the end of the story. And I thought about how it is never too late to be honest about what you actually feel, how the moment you choose truth over management, it changes the temperature of the room, and how the most important roads are sometimes the ones you did not plan to be on. I did not sleep for a long time. Not from anxiety, from something better. From the sensation of something reopening, a window lifted in a room that had been closed too long, the air finally moving again, the specific warmth of possibility before it has a name. Maybe she would call next week. Maybe next month. Maybe she would drive by the office building one day and think, "That is where we were," and it would be a good thought, not a wound. Maybe we would get to learn each other again slowly, honestly, without the hierarchy and the distance and the fear that had made everything so much harder than it needed to be. Or maybe something even better. Maybe the kind of thing that only happens when 2 people have already survived the worst of themselves and chosen, with full information and full awareness of the cost, to try again anyway. I would wait. I had learned finally how to wait. That is the other thing nobody tells you. That waiting, real waiting, patient and honest waiting, is not passivity. It is its own kind of courage. It is choosing to stay open in a world that is very good at teaching you to close. It is refusing the armor, even when the armor would be easier, even when you have worn it so long it feels like skin. I thought about all the mornings in that glass office when she would bring the coffee in and set it on my desk without asking, because she always knew. She always knew before I asked. And there would be this moment. Barely a moment, just a breath, where she would turn to go, and I would almost say something. I would feel the words beginning somewhere inside me, and I would catch them and hold them down and remind myself that I was her employer and she was my employee, and that was the structure. And the structure existed for a reason. I told myself it was professionalism. I told myself it was respect. What I did not tell myself, what I refused to tell myself, was that I was afraid that if I said a single true thing out loud, the rest of them would follow. And I had no idea what I would do with a life that contained that much truth. Fear is such a thorough architect. It will design every room for you and make them all look sensible, and you will live in the house it built and call it your life. And it will only be in the moments of absolute interruption, a snapped engine belt, 40-degree heat, a woman in an orange safety vest with road dust on her jaw, that you will look up and see the walls for what they are. There is a specific kind of love that does not announce itself with ceremony. It does not arrive dressed for the occasion. It shows up in orange safety vests and road dust and reading glasses and the ghost of a laugh, and the way someone says okay for the 3rd time and means something completely new. It shows up when your engine fails on an empty road, and the world strips you down to what you actually are. And there, in the impossible heat, in the place you never planned to stop, there it is, still exactly where you left it, patient and undimmed, waiting for the moment you were finally ready to recognize it for what it always was. If this story reached you today, something in it was meant for you. If you've ever let something real go because you were afraid of what it meant, if you've ever built a wall so strong you forgot there was a door, leave me a comment right now, from wherever you are, whatever time it is there. Tell me your name. Tell me your city. Tell me if you've ever been that person on the side of the road. Tell me if you've ever been the one driving past. Like this video if these two women made you feel something true. Subscribe so you're here when the next story begins, because I'll keep telling them, and some of them are going to find you at exactly the moment you need them. Thank you for being here. Really. Thank you.